So what I'd like to do today is on a very high level is just take a look at what holistic health actually means and then look at the pillars that are the foundation to build optimal health. These are my six pillars based on my experience and my education. So it's from my standpoint, and we'll talk a little bit more about those six pillars. And then at the end, I'd like to invite you and show you how you can take this to the next level and actually infuse these six pillars into your life and make them a reality. So let's start by understanding, first of all, the premise and the concept of holistic. Whether we're looking at it from a holistic perspective of health or nutrition, it all kind of funnels down to the same thing, is this concept that we operate as a whole. When we look at something holistically, we're looking at the whole aspect of, and in this case, the person. So we have to consider that we are not just a physical body. We have an emotional, mental, and spiritual body, and that's really what the foundation of holistic is. When we drill down further into holistic nutrition, it's all the facets that actually fuel us on a mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical level. So, hence the title of this presentation today: Nourish Your Mind, Body, Heart, and Soul. So, just as the body needs food, so does the heart, so does the mind, and so does the soul. So, just to kind of shed a little bit of a light onto this topic, if I were to ask you what actually nourishes you, what gives you pleasure, what keeps you alive, more than just food, well, okay, let's start from the beginning. Maybe you would say food is one aspect that nourishes you. Sure. What beyond food would you find that's fueling and brings you joy and pleasure and fuels you? And for each person, that might be obviously very different. But for some of us, it may be good sleep, fresh sheets, catching a sunrise, catching a sunset, snuggling with your pet, with your partner, with your children, with your grandchildren, listening to music, creating something. There are so many ways in which we can nourish ourselves that go beyond food. And that's really what holistic nutrition highlights, and what I want to really, as a blanket approach, take a look at today is health goes far beyond just food alone. So there's a saying that says, no amount of good food can nourish a starving soul. And I think that is absolutely true. I'll just add on to this. When I hear people talking about health today, it's really interesting. Most health topics center around potentially, what you're eating, maybe the quality or quantity, maybe what diet you're following, like, whether it's paleo or keto or intermittent fasting, or if you're vegan or you're vegetarian. So some relation to food, maybe quantities of food, and most often about exercise, how much or what type of exercise you're doing. So it has a lot to do with physique. And most recently, a lot of health topics that I hear center around how many hours a person is fasting in between meals, because intermittent fasting has seemed to take in the health world by storm. So I say that in tongue in cheek and jokingly, but I hope that you can see that health itself goes far just beyond our physical body and what we actually look like. So, if we take this concept of holistic well being and nutrition down to the next level, if we agree that what nourishes us goes beyond food, we must look at all of the factors in our surroundings that contribute to us living and fueling ourselves. So here we would take a look at our environment, whether that's the country that we live in, the region, the area, the community, our own physical environment, our home, that can be supportive or potentially unsupportive. So we must consider that. We must consider the quality of our minds, our thoughts, our sleep, and all of our patterns and habits that get ingrained into our life all make up and contribute to our overall well-being. So not to oversimplify this, but just to shed a little bit of an example on this scenario, is let me ask you if you were eating the world's healthiest foods, you exercised every day, and I mean, you looked like a killer in your yoga pants and in a bathing suit. You had amazing physique. Yet you had no friends, no social connection. You never left the house, and you're in a toxic, abusive relationship, and you never see the sunshine. Would you consider yourself a healthy and living optimal person? Would you consider that you're living like that it's a vital lifestyle that you have? Without oversimplifying it, I think if we focus just on what someone looks like, their appearance and their physique, that does not equate to health. And that's really what I want to dive into here with you today. I think there is a beautiful example that I wanted to share with you that addresses all of the factors that we're talking about in terms of holistic well being, holistic optimal health and living. And that comes down to the blue zones. If you haven't heard about the blue zones, these are regions around the world that have the longest and healthiest living people on the planet. There are currently 5 areas that are considered blue zones in the world. It's Icaria, Greece, easy for me to say, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda in California, and Okinawa in Japan. So these areas were researched. Actually, it started with Dan Buettner and some of his colleagues. Dan is a journalist, and he was looking at communities that had the longest living people and what their qualities were. And what he found was there were a few regions around the world that had the longest living people, so people that live beyond the age of 100, so the highest concentrations of centenarians. And by looking at a map, this is how the blue zones was born, from my understanding, is that they were circling the areas or the regions with a blue marker. So hence the very primitive labeling of the blue zones. But the interesting thing is what they found in these longevity kind of hotspots were some really key lessons from the people that have lived the longest. And the overlying factors, there were 9 compelling factors that were common in all of these areas. They were that they move naturally, that they're constantly in action, just regular activity. So whether it's walking or gardening, they're getting regular exercise on a they're getting exercise on a regular basis. So that's number one. They have a purpose. So they have a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to contribute, a way to feel connected. They also have techniques in which to relax. And this is important. They found that in these areas, people had low stress levels. And not that they had no stress, they had ways to deal with their stress. So they had techniques, whether it was breathing practices, taking regular breaks, or meditation practices. They had a way to shut off and relax and restore themselves. The next factor was they have an 80% rule, and this really applies to their diet. 80% rule in terms of feeling full. You can also look at an 80% rule of most of the time eating good, healthy, nourishing foods. And they all had a plant focused diet. So things that came directly from the earth. So vegetables, fruits, nuts, and legumes were a staple in all of these regions' diets. Next, they drink wine, sorry, drink wine. They drink water and sip wine. And isn't that interesting? That's kind of what our culture does here in North America. We more like drink wine and sip water. But in these regions, it's the opposite. They drink plenty of water and sip wine minimally with meals. They have a way to nurture their own spirit, whether that is belonging to an organized group, have a faith, believe in a religion. They have a connection to something other than themselves and a way that they can fuel their souls themselves. Next, they lean on their loved ones. So when they have need for support, they have loved ones, whether it's friends or family or chosen family, to have support from. And lastly, the ninth one is they have strong social bonds and social connections. So this gives them a sense of belonging and something to belong to. So I think we can, I hope we can learn from these blue zones if we want to live long, healthy, beautiful lives. So, when we're talking about holistic, just to expand on this point, when we look at the person as a whole, we must look at all segments and all aspects of ourselves. All that to say is life is constantly changing. Life is dynamic. If we were completely balanced all of the time, that would just mean that nothing needs adjusting and nothing needs changing, which is unrealistic. The reality is there are different seasons and different times in our life where different priorities float to the surface, and that's what we want. If everything was a priority all the time, then nothing is really a priority. So you may know this yourself, whether something happens in your career, if you're changing jobs or if you have a large project on the go. The career aspect, there's a lot of energy and attention focused on that area. Maybe some of the other areas of your life actually slip or shift down the priority scale. Conversely, if you have a health issue or your family member has a health issue and your focus and your priority is shifted there, other aspects may be affected in your life. What I wanted to highlight here by showing you this representation tool first is that you can use it for a tool for assessment for yourself. Second, that everything is interconnected when we look at it from a holistic perspective. So these factors are interdependent and interconnected upon one another, and each aspect is going to have an effect on another aspect or other aspects. So as an example, you may know this yourself. If you've suffered a health issue, that could lead to a whole ripple effect, positive and negative, if we increase our health or if our health slides. So if the health is going down, that can affect our emotional state, our mental state, our state of depression, of anxiety. That can ripple into our career, which can contribute to our financial health, which can affect our relationships, which can affect our pleasure. Like it can ripple into all different quadrants and categories. And that's what I just wanted to highlight here when we look at things from a holistic perspective. As we increase one area, it's going to have a synergistic ripple effect or some kind of effect on other aspects. I hope I'm not oversimplifying that. I just wanted to highlight the interconnectedness of holistic approach. All right. So what I'd like to do is get down to the 6 key foundational pillars that I work with. Now, these are the 6 pillars for optimal health that I feel are the foundation. There could be more, there could be less. This is just what I use. I'll go over them at a really high level here, and then I'll dive deeper into each one of these and actionable strategies of how to implement them into your life. So, some of these you may already be doing, and you may think that it's trivial or glossed over, but these are what I feel like, just as you're building a house and the house needs a foundation, these are the foundation to health, and it can be enhanced in many different directions from here. So first, I, as a holistic nutritionist, like to start with the things that are within our control, which is our diet and our lifestyle. So hence these 6 pillars. So they are hydration, proper hydration, diet, uh, Zen time or stress management strategies, physical movement, sleep, and connection. So we'll dive deeper into each one of these. The first aspect to health, I believe, has to start with water. It I don't know of anything more important than water in our lives. Like if we think about how long any living thing on this planet can live without water and or sunshine, it's not very long. So water really is the foundation to staying alive. And considering that our bodies are 90% water, virtually every single cell in our body requires water to do its job. So, this is why water is foundational to our health. It's going to help deliver the nutrients to our cells, take waste away from the cells. It's going to aid in digestion. It's going to aid in your brain function, in your skin, in your joints, in your mood, in your energy. Absolutely everything is affected by how much water we take in. So, if we're talking about being fatigued or mood, one of the key things to look at is your level of hydration. Like start there. It can be very simple by just missing the mark on your hydration levels. That can affect so many different aspects, as you see, from your physical health, but also emotional health and mental health. So if you, let me back up. What is an adequate amount of water? First of all, let's start there. So I'll give you a rule of thumb that I use. It really depends on the person and their activity levels, but as a general rule of thumb, you can take your body weight in pounds and divide it in half, and that's how many ounces of water you should have, or roughly in a day. That would be an adequate level of hydration. For an example, you weigh 150 pounds, divide that by two, 75 ounces. If you're drinking an 8-ounce glass of water, that's roughly about 10-ish glasses of water. So that equates to 2.5 liters of water a day. So if you're getting more physical activity, that is just for a person that is sedentary, that's just for optimal body functions. If you're getting physical activity, you're going to want more hydration than that. So if you're a person that this part of your life is already taken care of and this is an easy thing, we can move on to the next level, and that would be stacking it and making sure that you have adequate amounts of electrolytes and or salt so that your body can actually utilize the water in its most effective way. So I think it goes without saying, I hope it goes without saying that the first thing with hydration is making sure the water is clean and filtered. So that means not drinking tap water. And Brita water, I mean, there's some contaminants that are taken out, but if we're really trying to increase and optimize our health, we are looking for purely filtered water. When I talk about the electrolytes and the salt, I think this can raise some level of confusion sometimes for some people, when you think, oh my gosh, salt is bad. However, we've been trained to think that, but salt in its truest form, the purest forms of salt, have a lot of trace minerals in the salt and are super important and helpful for the body to utilize water, but also for we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about minerals. But salt, I'm talking about Himalayan sea salt or Celtic sea salt. There is a um, doctor who authored a book. His whole life's work was actually centered around these two things, water and salt. His story is pretty interesting. I don't think I have enough time to go into it today because I have a lot more to cover. But Dr. Batman Joldich, I hope I say his name right. I call him Dr. Batman, but he authored a book, The Body's Many Cries for Water, if you want to dive deeper into how salt is actually super beneficial for the distribution of water, particularly making the brain the top priority. So, an interesting read. Next, we will dive into diet. I think that's pretty customary as a nutritionist to talk about diet, how we fuel ourselves. Obviously, our primary source of fuel comes from food, the nutrients that we take in, and our ability to assimilate those foods, break down the nutrients, remove the waste, and utilize what we've just taken in. So we eat various foods for various reasons that have different nutrients that support different organs and different functions. And we can, if we're looking to feed ourselves and give ourselves energy, we're going to want to start with things that were alive because their energy is going to give us energy. If we're looking at the holistic perspective, living things will give other living things the energy. So we can start there just by eating whole foods straight from the earth and staying away from things that, you know, were never alive, like things that come in a box or processed or packaged. So what comes from the earth, if we follow the Blue Zones diet, things that were grown from the earth in plants. So we're looking at vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, those sorts of things. On a very high scale, what I would like to address is the importance of macronutrients. So there's three macronutrients. You've probably heard of them. You may have heard people talking about counting macros. So the macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates are of the utmost importance. Those three macronutrients are what is required to keep us alive. And it goes deeper down into the next level, into the micronutrients, because the macros provide us the micronutrients. But we'll start with the protein macronutrient. Protein is the building block of all of our cells. So we start with protein because every cell needs protein to function. So protein comes from the Greek word primos, which means primary. It's of primary importance is our protein. So you may have heard a lot of talk about people counting macros and how much protein they have, and for good reason. However, the quality of the protein is is just as important. The next macro is fats, and good quality fats are fuel for our brain. That's how our brain gets fuel. It's also how our cells stay permeable. If you think about a cell being a cylinder or a sphere, sorry, a sphere is a better description. How nutrients get in and waste get out is through the cell membrane, and how we keep the cell membranes permeable is by ingesting good quality fats. Thirdly is the carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates. That is our body's primary source of fuel. And when we think about carbohydrates, those are plants. So fruits, vegetables, seeds, legumes, those sorts of things. So when we break down where the micronutrients are coming from, micronutrients are essentially the vitamins and the minerals that our body needs in very small amounts to function optimally. I think we often hear about people talk about vitamins, but what tends to get glossed over, from my opinion, are minerals. Minerals are required for vitamins to do their job. So when I talk about electrolytes or trace minerals, these are all intertwined. And the reason I'm so passionate about them and talking about them is because our soil is deficient of micronutrients because of our farming practices, our monocropping, our spraying. So our soil is devoid of micronutrients. So if we're not getting it from the plants and the seeds and fruits and vegetables that we're eating, where are we really getting it from? And oftentimes we may need to look to supplementation in this regard. So where we get some really great trace minerals is from the sea. So hence my recommendation for sea salt or Himalayan salt because of the mineral components in there. Um, I hope I hope that wraps up at least on a high level, of the importance of micronutrients are just as important, if not more important, than the macronutrients themselves. When we're talking about feeding ourselves from the most optimal level, we want to make sure that we're feeding our gut. And there are, if you probably have heard about the microbiome in your gut, there's trillions of microorganisms that live in our gut, and what we feed that actually sends signals to the brain for our feel good hormones, our appetite, our mood, our energy. So, neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin are released depending on what is in our stomach. It's sending signals to the brain. So, it's really important to feed our gut good quality whole foods straight from the earth as close as possible, and avoid the packaged, the chemicals, the genetically modifieds, the sugars, because that is going to create inflammation and actually slow down our hormones' abilities to signal back and forth to each other. It can also impair our cognition, how we think, our level of energy. It has such a ripple effect just by the state of our gut. So that's one of the reasons why food is so important, and of course the foundation of how we fuel our physical bodies. I want to say here that I'm encouraging you to listen to your own body and its own signals. Our body has this beautiful innate wisdom to communicate what it needs, and it communicates by signals. And oftentimes these signals get muffled or shushed or hushed, thinking that, something's wrong or we're just getting older. There is no one diet that is perfect for absolutely everybody. This is my approach. I use very customized nutrition program for every person rather than following blanket kind of trends or diets. I believe in a very custom approach. That's a topic for another time. We can talk about that later if you want to. But when you're listening to your body signals, please listen to the things that you think are just kind of off, whether it's gas or bloating or indigestion, constipation, diarrhea, skin rashes, itch, intolerances to different foods, cravings, headaches, fatigue, hot flashes. These are all symptoms. They're little signs your body is waving and trying to wave a flag to get you to pay attention that something is imbalanced and off and needs attention. Next, I want to dive into another one of the pillars, which is the ability to manage stress. So, as a human, we are not going to escape being stressed. That's just part of life. If you're human, you're going to endure some stress, and it's a good thing, actually. So, stress is a beautiful survival mechanism that keeps us alive. Our body's primary objective is survival. That's step number one. Step number two is procreate, but really, survival is the most optimal um, function and desire for our human body. So, stress is designed to keep us away from danger and keep us safe and keep us alive, which is a really good thing. I think I love living. The problem becomes when the stress becomes long term and or chronic. This can become an issue, and I'm sure you've heard all of the rants and raves about how stress can affect all aspects of our health, whether it's physical health with cardiovascular issues, blood pressure issues, disease, imbalance, mental function, digestive issues, sleep problems, all of that, but also our mental and emotional and spiritual health as well. When we are constantly under stressed or not aligned, this can wreak havoc in so many ways. So there was a study done um, recently about on mice, and it was done in humans too. But the study concluded the same thing. A little bit of stress is actually good. It allows our cells and our bodies to engage in some challenge to become stronger and more resilient. Versus no stress is no good. So no stress is no good because that means you're not like challenging yourself. You're not really living. You're not really thriving if there's no challenge. You're just existing. But also too much stress is no good. So what the findings were, and I'm sure you can attest to this, is it decreases longevity and well-being in both of those areas. So it shortens the telomeres, so it increases aging, which means we have shorter life expectancies when we have high degrees of stress. Stress in itself is, like I said, it's a good thing. The interesting thing about stress is whether the stress is imagined, perceived, or real, our body goes through the exact same biological response, whether we're thinking about paying our bills on time, getting to our taxes, stuck in traffic, or if we are actually outrunning a lion. The same physiological responses happen, and this is where it becomes a problem and can wreak a lot of havoc in terms of our mood, our energy levels, and how we're functioning optimally over time. So if we think about the stress response, and if you are physically outrunning a lion that's going to eat you, there's a lot of things that happen physiologically. Your digestion, first of all, gets shut down because all of the blood flow is going to the extremities to outrun the danger so that your muscles can move quickly. Your eyes dilate, your blood pressure increases, your libido is turned off. There are a whole host of a cascade of biological responses that happen when we are in the stress mode. The stress itself is not the issue; it's the ability to turn it off, to be um, I don't know what the word is, flexible, I guess, in the aspect of being able to go from a stress mode to a relaxed mode. It's when we stay in the constant state of stress that's really harmful for all aspects of ourself, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. There's a really interesting book and a read by Dr. Eppel. If her name is Dr. Elisa Eppel, and it's The Stress Prescription. If you wanted to dive deeper, she talks about really, she authors a number of books, but one of them is about stress and how to stress better. And it's actually stress, she talks about stress being a good thing and being able to turn it off and not just to heal, but to repair in the process. Next, we'll touch on exercise. I think this is pretty blanket information that most of us know that moving our body is really good for all aspects of our cognition, of our physical being, emotional being, the endorphins, like all aspects of ourselves are infused by exercise. We are meant to move. We are completely meant to move. We are not built to be put on a shelf. Our bodies are designed for movement and and action. We're meant to hunt and procreate. That's what we're meant to do. So, the interesting thing about exercise that I just want to, there's a couple of things that I want to touch on, particularly as time goes on and we age. It's really important to keep our muscle capacity and strength strong. So, Obviously, that means potentially lifting heavy things and or strength training. We can talk about cardiovascular activity, but really to keep the body moving and keep our metabolism revving and our ability to hold up our own body weight is we need to have the strength to do that. So strength training, particularly as we age, I think is really important. The other thing that I will address here is because is let me finish my first thought. The first thing that I'll address is the quality or quantity of the amount of movement that we get, whether that can add more stress or not. If you think about what exercise is, the immediate effects of exercise is we are stressing our body in some capacity. If you're lifting heavy things, you're breaking down the muscle so that the muscle gets stronger, rebuilds stronger and more resilient. So the immediate response is stress, which is, I mean, this is a good stress because we get stronger over time. However, if you are taxed out, like tapped out in all other aspects of yourself, totally fatigued, having more strenuous activity is not going to be your friend. This comes with a word of caution and perhaps a conversation, at least just something to consider. I deal with predominantly a lot of women, middle-aged women who have hormone and or metabolic imbalances and are stressed out. So cortisol levels are already super high. And then if they want to go run a marathon, that just adds more stress to the bucket and actually does more harm potentially than good. So there's a really fine line because when we have no energy, some activity is actually good. It's kind of counterintuitive. So if we think we have no energy to work out, actually exercising more or exercising to some degree can give us more energy. So there's a really fine line, and it's really an independent conversation to have either with yourself or your healthcare practitioner is how much is too much and what is the right quantity and maybe what is the right activity. The one thing that I would encourage you to consider is that you're doing something that you actually love, that you enjoy. If you are thinking that, you know, you need to run to lose weight or to keep in shape, and that's adding more stress either to your physical body, but also to your emotional body, it's just adding more of the same kind of stress. And that's not what we want. We want to perhaps get out of the go mode and maybe into the slow mode. So maybe you could look at things more like yoga or Pilates or swimming or something that is a little bit more gentler where you can still build muscle, but that's supportive and actually that you love and you enjoy. You're going to be more inclined to do it and it's going to be far more supportive in all aspects. All right, the next pillar that I'd love to talk about is sleep. I think we all know how important sleep is. The blanket recommendation is between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. This is the time when we are healing, when all of our cells are doing their repair, where our brain is actually categorizing everything that it just went through and putting it into files. It's like a defrag and then uploading to the hard drive. That is really what's super important is our sleep. So there's a couple of ways that we can focus on sleep. Um, some very basic kind of introduction levels if you are having trouble sleeping is making sure your room is dark, it's a cool environment away from any electronics, that you give yourself some lead time to build up to sleep where you can shut down the lights, you know, an hour before, shut off your technology an hour before, get your mind and your body prepared. It's like a little bit of an invitation to what's coming next. It's it's interesting the studies that are coming out now. We used to focus on so much more of the duration, but now there's a lot of studies that show the regular sleep wake cycle is more important than actually the duration. So it turns out that well, all of our cells have these little clocks, circadian clocks. We have a circadian clock that follows natural rhythms. Our body processes follow the same clock. Different parts of us heal and have their own internal schedule. And they all communicate to one another. So if we just even affect our sleep or our sleep time frame by just an hour, or a couple of hours, a couple of times a week, that really impairs our ability to heal. We think, oh, if I'm just going to bed an hour or two later, I'll just sleep longer and I'll catch up. But that's not how the body works. The body is already on a clock, on a system, on a schedule, just like the moon and the earth. Like we all have these natural rhythms, so does our body. So to really honor that is to really infuse a consistent pattern, if you can, as best as you can. I know for some of us that's not possible based on work schedules and life schedules, but as best as you can, that would be the most supportive thing that you can do is keep a consistent cycle. The other thing that I find that really helps with sleep cycles is getting your blood sugar balance. When we talk about macronutrients in our diet, that equates to having balanced meals a few times a day, 3 times a day with no snacking in between. That's going to regulate insulin levels so that we can, it's kind of like the key conductor for the rest of the hormone signals and how we can get melatonin to function a little bit better and serotonin is by having some blood sugar balance. So oftentimes our blood sugar and the cascade of the hormonal effect can keep us up at night. So really balancing blood sugar is something to consider. Also getting morning sunlight, getting exposure to daily sunlight or in the morning as close as you can to the time that you wake or even before 10 o'clock is really helpful. There are some neurons in our eyes that when the sun triggers them, it it produces cortisol, and that cortisol then trips the clock to produce melatonin 12 to 14 hours later. So that melatonin, as you may know, is our sleep hormone. So how we regulate our our circadian clock and our sleep cycle is by getting light, sunlight, and daylight. So light is going to affect our sleeping cycle. So this is why it's important when you are going to bed to not turn on any lights. When you get up in the middle of the night, if you have to use the bathroom or do anything or have any screen time, because of the trigger of the rest of the hormonal cascade. There's a really great resource if you want to know more about the morning sunlight. There is a neurobiologist, Andrew Huberman. It's the Huberman Lab podcast. You can find him anywhere. He's on YouTube and or anywhere you have a where you get your podcast. He's really easy to listen to, super smart, and it's there's a lot of really amazing and great health information there as well. I think it's a great resource for you. Lastly, I want to talk about the pillar of connection. I think we've all maybe had a taste of not being connected to society in the last few years, or potentially you had at least maybe a little glimpse into what that feels like. It can be very lonely, depressing, isolating. You can feel segregated and not part of anything. So these isolation factors can really affect our mental health and our physical health and our emotional health and also spiritually. So when we have a sense of connection, belonging to something, we have more resilience. We have a higher tolerance for stress. So it's been found there's a lot of studies done on the connection too. The people that are more connected tend to be more physically active. So they have lower rates of depression, lower rates of anxiety, their lifespan are increased, and when we have strong social connections, we also have a sense of support of not being alone. So I think that goes without saying. Um, to dive deeper into this topic is the idea and the notion, if we want to get a little bit more connected and take this to the next level would be to be giving back to the community, to our connections. So I think I hope we've all had this experience where you give something and you just feel this sense of fulfillment. It's not something you can get by doing anything else. You can accomplish your own financial goals, your own material goals, reach your own success, whatever they are. And yeah, that feels like a sense of accomplishment, but it doesn't have the same degree as of fulfillment as giving. And it's interesting what happens when we do give. We give from, first of all, a place of abundance. We have something to give, whether it's our time, our energy, our resources, a compliment, our energy. Like it doesn't matter what we're giving. We're giving something that we have to someone that doesn't have what we have. So we're giving from a state of abundance, and that's a beautiful energy to give from. But what that does is it gives us a sense of gratitude, and also the receiver is grateful. So it's kind of like this little bit of a love fest. I'm giving from gratitude. The person receiving is getting gratitude. And you're getting back more gratitude, which gives them more gratitude. And it's just like this cyclical spiral, and that really fuels itself. So it's a beautiful thing. There is some recent studies Harvard did about happiness, and they found that happier people tend to give more. And interestingly, giving people are more happy. So what what starts what? Happy people give, and giving people are happy. So if you want to be happy, is to give. So not, I mean, not only are you contributing to your own state of well-being when we give, we are also giving to the community, to the society in general. So there's a lot of studies done now with doing acts of kindness, volunteering, being of service, and this notion of giving. And the studies show that people who are contributing have a better state of mental health, also better stress resilience. So interestingly, when we are focusing on someone else, we are taking our attention, our internal attention away from our own problems and focusing on someone else. So that gives us a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and also a sense of connectedness. So we are nurturing relationships by simply this very simple act of giving. And I just want to layer this on. If you're thinking, I don't have anything to give, I don't have time, I don't have the money, I don't have enough for myself, how can I possibly give? I think there are many ways we can give, and it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It can be a simple compliment, a simple smile, a simple hello, a simple lending a hand, opening a door for a person, letting someone in traffic or in the grocery line. There are such small little random acts of kindness that we can do to enhance other people's lives that I think we have. And rather than today, me giving you a resource and some additional supportive information for this, I'm going to invite you and ask you to test this out yourself. Test how it feels when you give. Test how your state of involvement, your energy, your mental capacity, how you feel, how light your heart is, how big your heart is when you actually give. That is really the true test, in my opinion. I think it brings us much greater life satisfaction. It has positive psychological effects, and it just has a ripple effect into all aspects. That's perfect segue into how one positive change in one quadrant, one section of our life can have a ripple effect, particularly when we're looking at this as a holistic level. So this fuels our health, this fuels our mindset, this fuels our state of being, our community, our planet, all of it. It's just like the balance wheel, how one quadrant affects the other. So too do us as people. One person can have such a positive impact and effect on other people. And based on the ripple effect, the idea is as we enhance any area of our life, other areas of our life are enhanced as well. So this is the positive ripple effect that I wanted to encourage you today. Whether you start with your mind or your body or your heart or your soul, there are many ways that we can feel nourished, which keep us alive, give us energy, and give us the purpose and connectedness to live and to thrive. Because that's really the objective here, is not just merely to get by and pay bills and just get through this thing called life. We really want to take it to the next level and be optimal. I want you to live an optimal life. I hope you do too.